Ooh, my goddamn garage, oh baby, now my goddamn garage. Where we're going now, my goddamn garage. Oh baby, now my goddamn garage. Where we're going now, my goddamn garage. Talking Norm Macdonald.
The week that I found out Norm Macdonald died, he was the fifth person within about a week's worth of days that had died who was close to me. Now, Norm Macdonald wasn't really close to me, I suppose. I don't know the man, or I never knew the man. But he was close to me in a way. And maybe that'll make more sense by the end of this episode. So it was sort of a big deal because here all these people passed away, and you're looking to your favorite comedian to try to get you through those rough times. And then he passes away at the end of that chunk of people passing away. And this is a comedian who joked about death an awful lot. And for him to die at the end of me dealing with a bunch of death, well, it was like an extra kick in the teeth in a way. And before that moment, I had thought to myself that I sort of liked the idea that my death would be long and drawn out and not, I would go to sleep and not wake up one day. I sort of like the idea that if death is this mysterious thing we only do once, and we sort of dread it, that if I'm going to experience this, I should really take some time to sit with it and figure out what it's all about, live within it. I'm only going to get the one opportunity. It's the last thing I'm going to do, so why not? But after that week, I'm not so sure anymore. Why'd the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? This is a joke I heard Norm discuss in an interview a long time ago. And he talked about how, in theory, this joke shouldn't work, especially not with children, because the joke seems to be built upon the notion that you already know good punchlines to that setup. But we don't. And I'm not saying the joke works. I don't know anyone who's laughing at that joke, but it's survived somehow. We still tell it to kids. Kids can still giggle at it. How is it that a kid who has no reference for good punchlines to the joke understands the nonsense version of the joke, which is almost like an anti-joke or meta-joke? And I know Norm hated that concept of meta-comedy, and I think because it was unfunny, and almost anything unfunny just shouldn't belong in comedy by default. Not that he didn't play with the notion. Once he knew about it and had been accused of it, he certainly did. I mean, on the sports show, he has that joke. A lot of people tell me I should do more meta-comedy, so there you go. So he was aware of it, and he knew, and he played with it on occasion. But he didn't seem to like the idea. But he did like the idea of things just being funny and focusing on the craft of funny. How do you make a room of people laugh? And why did the chicken cross the road joke, even though it might not work for adults and only sort of works for kids, its longevity sort of shows that you can really play with expectations with an audience, and the craft of funny can still be there. Comedy can be the unexpected. Norm has also talked about his love for Brian Regan an awful lot, and I know that he mentioned how Brian Regan and Jerry Seinfeld both are able to get an awful lot of laughter out of being really angry about seemingly meaningless things. The instructions on a Pop-Tart box, just kind of nonsense that goes on in our everyday lives, the minutiae and the little details. And he thought, well, since it's hilarious to watch these people get frustrated and angry over these tiny little details, could the opposite work? Maybe I could be flippant and nonchalant about really important, terrible things. And it seems like a simple flip. And it's funny how I watched him his whole career, and he did this continually, and I never noticed. Right from the early days, in the dating game bit, in his very early days, he has a bit where one of the contestants in the dating game is kind of a weirdo. And the bachelorette has to say, "Oh, if I were a popsicle, what would you do to me?" "Now, if you're a popsicle, first I'd take off your wrapper, if you know what I mean. Then I'd grab a hold of your sticks, if you know what I mean. And then I'd press you against the counter till you're broken too, but half you in the freezer till later, if you know what I mean." And that joke, when you think about it, he is being really nonchalant about a psychopath, a potential serial killer on our hands here. And as if it's not a big deal. Then he goes to Letterman, in his first routine on Letterman, he does a bit about a guy who ends up cutting up his family because the devil told him to, but then it turns out that it was just his neighbor playing a practical joke on him. Later on, He's got the famous bit where he kills and murders a woman so he can dig a deep grave and put her into it, because it starts off with a shallow grave and fake news bit. Even in the moth joke, there's the guy's contemplating suicide, says he no longer loves his son. There's all these dark, terrible things going on throughout his comedy, but it's still fine to put on TV. It's the way he handles the material is so light and so nonchalant that nobody seems to notice. And it does work. And he did this to me for years, and I never even really noticed. Sometimes it seems like a lot of people want their comedians to reflect back their political or social ideologies at them, and someone who doesn't do that in the correct way, they don't want to listen to or appreciate anymore. And maybe that's more common now than it used to be, or maybe the noise of social media makes it really hard to tell what's going on at ground level. But it seems there's some retribalizing going on there. In any case, there's been a lot of these comics over the years that would be polarizing in that kind of environment, and still are today. You got Mort Saul to Lenny Bruce to Bill Hicks and to many of the people doing it now. And a lot of people seem to think that these are more important comics, that they're more relevant somehow. And Norm sort of argued against that idea by saying that, the Brian Regan and the Jerry Seinfelds or the Rodney Dangerfields even might be dealing with the minutia of everyday life, but perhaps that's more what our lives actually are, is these little details of what we do from moment to moment that build up together and create who we really are. And so perhaps these other comics are the most important of all. It's certainly an interesting idea, worthy of consideration, because somebody who can appeal to more people across more time is clearly dealing with something universal about who we are, as opposed to these polarizing figures who honestly don't date that well. You could listen to Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce today. It's hard, but you can. It doesn't age very well on account of what it's dealing with, the subject matter that it chose. So I can understand what Norm's talking about and how he tried to choose more robust topics for his comedy. Not to say there isn't a place for the other type, but I appreciate that Norm went about it the way that he did. One time I heard Norm mention this line I've heard a lot of people say. Comedians are modern-day philosophers. And Norm would say, who hates that line? Modern-day philosophers. And you can see how the line sort of erases the existence of actual modern-day philosophy. It's not a bad line. Not that he didn't get philosophical on occasion. But, modern-day philosophy is so difficult to get into. It's so abstract and impenetrable that if you were to compare the two, it's nothing similar at all in a lot of ways. But stand-up comedians do popularize the notion of being philosophical as something you can just do for entertainment. So I know what people mean when they say it. But I like that Norm has that line about it, and I like that it shows that he's aware that that's not what his job is up there on that stage. His job is to make you laugh, and that's 100% his goal. He doesn't want you to applaud, because that just shows you're agreeing. He wants you to laugh, because you should be surprised and dealing with the unexpected and having that involuntary release of laughter. And I really like that he approached comedy this way. It makes it a little bit more robust. People will try to say, I've heard it many times before, that Norm just doesn't care. He just doesn't care, because he'll go on stage and he might not get a laugh, and he'll sit through the uncomfortableness of not getting the laugh and just stare at the camera deadpan. And I don't think it's that he doesn't care. I think it's that what he cares about is not so much the audience response in the moment. What he cares about is the notion of comedy itself, and he'll believe in the joke strongly enough. He'll believe in the legacy of comedy strongly enough that if the audience doesn't agree, that's not going to bother him. He's strong in his beliefs, and he knows what a funny joke is, and he's going to live with that joke, whether you get it or not. And that's not quite the same thing as he doesn't care. In the famous Bob Saget roast that Norm does, he definitely cares. It seems like he doesn't care because he's not respecting what a roast should be. They want him to be really offensive and crude and say all these horrible things, and he's not doing it. It's not that he's not capable. I've seen him do that kind of thing before. He just chooses to not do it in this moment. And he said to Bob, I love you and I don't want to have to say horrible things about you. I'm not going to do it. And they said, just do something unexpected. And he thought, unexpected. So I just do the opposite and, big deal. So he'll just go up there and not do that. And that should be funny. And we've already established that Norm can be that way at the beginning with the why the chicken crossed the road joke. Norm has always liked to play with that notion of because it's not funny, therefore that is funny because it's what it's supposed to be is funny, and now you got the unexpected. So it can work at times. Now, the jokes aren't that bad. Some of them are okay, actually, the ones that he tells that night, but in an odd, antiquated way. It's sort of something charming and sweet about them. And so you could say he doesn't care because he's not respecting the way the roast works and he's bombing in the eyes of some roast fans. Or you could say he cares so much about Bob and the art of comedy that he can't go up there and just do a hack job on this kind of thing and do the same thing many other people have done and say bad things about his friend that he loves. He doesn't see anything. He cares too much to do something like that. The thing about that roast is it's not just the roasting of the roast. It's making a statement to his friend. And that goes beyond the roasting of the roast, which is also funny. Now, because people have all noticed it, and I noticed it too, how when I first saw the bit, I thought he was bombing. At the very beginning, I sat there just jaw down. What the hell's going on? Why is Norm doing this? Doesn't make any sense. I knew he hadn't lost it because I'd seen him be completely different than that. I'd never seen him like this before, so something was going on. But it took me a while to click in. And then by the end of it, I was laughing pretty hard, but it was a journey to get there. So it fooled me too in some ways. But at the same time, if you see a comedian up on a stage like that, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. It's not that complicated. And the roasting of the roast element, sure, it is there because we all noticed it a bit. But that's not the tail that wags the dog. A picture hung on the wall of our parlor. In it, a woman was taking a shirt from a clothesline. She had clothespin in her teeth, and it was windy, and a boy was tugging at her dress. The woman looked like she was in a hurry, and the whole scene gave me the idea that just outside the frame, full dark clouds were gathering. But that was not what it was. It was paint. So I decided right then and there to see the picture as it really was. I stared at the thing long and hard, trying to only see the paint, but it was no use. All my eyes would allow me to see was the lie. In fact, the longer I gazed at the paint, the more false detail I began to imagine. The boy was crying as if afraid, and the woman was weaker than I had first believed. I finally gave up. I understood that it takes a powerful imagination to see a thing for what it really is. Fantastic book. This is obviously not a memoir. It says a memoir. It's not. It's a piece of fiction. It's a piece of literature. There are some details of Norm's life in here. You can work out which ones are real and which ones are not, if you so desire. Check out this book. It's a piece of art. It's not a celebrity journal. When I was young, my father and I used to watch stand-up comedy specials together. We would go rent VHS tapes from Dangerfields, and they'd have 6 different comedians on them. And we saw Jerry Seinfeld that way, and Andrew Dice Clay, and all these other people. And it was a moment for my dad and I. And we'd also get other videotapes, and we had albums. He had the Bill Cosby albums and George Carlin, and we would get Robin Williams VHS tapes that my uncle found for us. Some of these were bootleg even. We were really into stand-up comedy, and it was something we did together. And one night there was a special on, and it was up-and-coming comedians from all over North America. And on that special was Norm Macdonald. And there was other people that I discovered there. Ellen DeGeneres was on it, I think. It was hosted by Dudley Moore. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. Anyways, it was a fun special. We recorded on VHS tape, and there was 3 or 4 bits from Norm. There's the Wiener Dog bit, the dating game bit, the $1 Million Chance of a Lifetime, maybe something else. I can't recall now. And those were my favorite bits of the whole thing. I instantly fell in love with this guy. He became my favorite stand-up right away. Now, that might have been biased because it said Toronto Yuck Yucks on the bottom, so I knew he was Canadian. And there wasn't a lot of Canadian stand-up comics that a young boy could see in a rural town where there is no live scene. I'm just dealing with the media that I get, and there wasn't anything for me to see except on CBC radio. And you can't see that, of course. What am I saying? Anyways, there wasn't a lot. And so this was a big deal. And it wasn't that he was Canadian either. There was more than that, because within the way he spoke, it sounded like someone I knew. He's from rural Quebec, and I'm from rural Northern Ontario. And the town I grew up in was about half French. The town he grew up in was considerably more French, but it was still a French-English mix. And I'm familiar with small town Quebec. Just remember, 19 years old in Ontario, you can drink, 18 Quebec. We were about an hour and a half drive from the border. So I'm pretty familiar with Quebec. And the accent that he had was one that I knew very well. And so I felt like I knew him. And when you know someone, now I understand why Americans could see more into some of these American figures than I'm able to see. Because when you know someone's regional sensibilities and their specific dialect, it really helps you pick up on the nuance of what it is that they mean a lot more, and you feel more included. So when he would be telling a story or a joke or something, I felt like I knew those characters and I knew that world really well. And I think that extra depth of knowledge can help you. This is one of the reasons we might have cultural biases. I don't want to get into all that nonsense, but they probably exist to some degree. And I was feeling that with Norm. So that was definitely a part of it. Part of it was the fact that I was a young boy and I had discovered him with my father. We were searching for different stand-ups, and that's how I found him. That was that way. So, and then he lasted with me my whole life, because this is before SNL. I saw him when he showed up on late shows. It was like I followed that whole career, and I, devoured any interviews I could find. He didn't do a lot of stand-up specials, right? He wasn't a big fan of them. The two he did are pretty good. I think the first one, me doing stand-up, is better than the Hitler's Dog one, but they're both pretty good. He was better live. I saw him live many times, although he could be worse live too. But for my money, there was never anybody funnier than Norm. I loved that man like I've never loved a celebrity. Just a fantastic comedian. Nobody brought me more joy that I don't know personally. Nobody. No musical artist. Norm, just his career paralleled the most important parts of my life in so many ways that I don't see how anybody else could possibly have the same amount of meaning for me personally. So I'm really going to miss him. I loved that guy, man. Rest in peace, Norm Macdonald. And cheers to all of the other Norm fans out there. I love seeing the Norm jokes just quoted one after another underneath any video with him and whoever else. Doesn't matter. The Norm fans show up en masse and they lay down the Norm jokes in there, and they always find entertaining ways to include them in the comment. So yeah, God bless Norm Macdonald. Well, I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'll be a diamond someday. Well, I'm gonna grow and glow till I'm blue, pure and perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna put a smile on everybody's face. Well, I'm gonna kneel and pray every day. Least I should become vain along the way. Well, I'm just an old chunk of coal, oh Lord, yeah, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday. Well, I'm gonna find the best way to walk. Gonna search to find a better way to talk. Well, I'm gonna spit and polish this old rough edge itself, yeah, until I fixed up every single flaw. Well, I'm gonna be the world's best friend, darling. Gonna go around shaking everybody's hand. Well, I'm gonna be the cotton picking rage of the age, yeah. I'm gonna be a diamond someday. Well, I'm just an old chunk of coal. Well, I'm gonna be a diamond someday. I'm gonna grow and glow till I'm blue, pure and perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna put a smile on everybody's face. I'm gonna kneel and pray every day. At least I become vain along the way. Well, I'm just an old chunk of coal, oh Lord, yeah, but I'm gonna be a diamond someday.